Hello, I'm Ari Jules. I'm delighted to be with you here today at SmartCon in my new role as Chief Scientist of Chainlink. In fact, I'm doubly delighted because, as was announced earlier today, I'm going to talk about DECO, a technology developed in my separate role at Cornell Tech and IC3 that Chainlink has just acquired. To explain what DECO is, let me first give you a motivating example involving cryptographers' two favorite people, Alice and Bob. Now, Bob is about to launch a new token called Bob's Bubble Token, and he's going to be holding a token sale. Bob has particular ideas about how to make his token sale responsible. He wants to ensure that his tokens are fairly distributed, they're not all snapped up by a whale, for instance, and that people who participate can reasonably afford to do so. So he sets the following rule. To buy up to 100 BBT, you have to show that there's a bank account with your name on it that contains at least $5,000. This makes it hard for people to create fictitious identities and is also a kind of accreditation. We won't worry about concealing names at this point. Now, Alice would very much like to participate in this most promising of token sales. So she logs into her bank account online and checks her balance. And she discovers, lo and behold, that she has more than $5,000. So she goes to Bob and says, "Hi, Bob, I've got more than $5,000 in my bank account." Naturally, Bob's response is the question, can you prove it? So how can Alice prove to Bob that she has a bank account with at least $5,000 in it? First idea is for Alice to take a screenshot of her bank account balance and send it to Bob. But this is a problem in that it's relatively easy to modify a screenshot using, say, Photoshop. Alice might have no money in her account and yet pretend to be a multimillionaire. So clearly this isn't going to work. Another possibility is that Alice sends her login credentials, her username and password, to Bob. Bob then logs into her account and checks her account balance. Now this works, but it's a bad habit for Alice to get into if she wants to keep her bank account balance above $5,000. So that's not quite going to work. We observe, though, that when Alice logs into her bank's website, she's almost certainly using HTTPS. This means she's establishing a secure connection with the bank via TLS. That's the protocol that's used everywhere on the internet to secure data. In TLS, the server presents to Alice a certificate validating its identity in a public key. And in the course of the key exchange protocol or the handshake, it's digitally signing a message. This is all well and good, especially the use of digital signatures. And it seems like we might somehow be able to leverage TLS to solve our problem of authenticating Alice's bank account balance to Bob. But there's a problem with TLS. It does indeed use public key cryptography and digital signatures to perform key exchange, but this is to exchange symmetric keys for the session, for what's called the record layer. In other words, when data is exchanged between Alice and the server, it's secured using a key that the two of them share. They're using what's called a MAC, or message authentication code, rather than a true signature. Consequently, Alice is just as capable of signing data, in this sense at least, as the bank is. There's no digital signature on data that can be shown to a third party to provide trustworthy proof about the data provided by the bank, or the server in this case. There are proposals to change TLS, like the very nice TLSN scheme from ETH Zurich, and schemes like OpenID sign some data. But in general, to get the kind of widespread data signing we'd like to have for an Oracle network would require big infrastructural changes and impractical ones. And in fact, digitally signing data isn't good enough because of confidentiality requirements, as we'll see in just a moment. So to summarize here, forwarding TLS data to Bob is no better than a screenshot. Again, because Alice is just as capable of signing data as the server is. As a result, there's lots of unusable private data sitting in web servers. Things like bank account balances and identity information, identity documents like driver's licenses, and private enterprise data or private APIs. This situation is really frustrating for Oracle builders. Having data locked up this way is a frustration. Our solution to this problem is the system called Deco. What Deco aims to do is liberate this data, if you will, so it can be used in blockchain systems and elsewhere. Specifically, we want a user to be able to log into a website via TLS and then prove statements about the data she receives to a verifier using zero-knowledge proofs. For instance, in our banking example, we'd like Alice to be able to prove to Bob that she has more than $5,000 in her account, ideally without even revealing her bank account balance. And we would like to do this with no modification to the server. That way we can build on legacy infrastructure. But wait a minute, didn't I just say that TLS can't do this? I did, but Deco sidesteps the limitations of TLS using some tricks I'll now explain. So let's take a glimpse under the hood of Deco. Let me spend a few minutes explaining how it works. You don't need to understand any of this explanation to grasp what Deco does, but I'd like at least to convey some flavor of its mechanics. The key idea is something we call a three-party handshake. In explaining what that is, I'm going to refer to Alice and Bob alternatively as the prover and verifier, because those are the roles that they'll be playing in the protocol here. When Alice or the prover logs into a website, the session key she establishes with the server is going to be split on the client side between the prover and verifier. The session key, this all-critical key, is going to be equal to the sum of shares held by Alice and Bob. Neither of them will know the key in its entirety. In order to make this happen, the prover and verifier need to interact in a way I'll describe. Now, I'm not going to describe the full protocol, which is pretty complicated. I'm just going to describe a tiny piece to give you some intuition for how it works. In a normal TLS key exchange, the client randomly generates a private key, which we'll call X. She then computes the corresponding public key, Y, and she sends this to the server, this Y or Y sub client. In Deco, what happens is something like this. The verifier first generates his own private key, X sub V, at random, computes the public key, and sends that corresponding public key to the prover. The prover then generates her own private key, X sub P, and computes the corresponding public key, Y sub P. And what she sends to the server is the product of her public key and the verifier's public key. Thanks to an additive homomorphism here, the private key X corresponding to Y sub client, the public key sent to the server, is exactly the sum of the private key of the prover and the private key of the verifier. So we've split the private key here. Now again, this is only one tiny piece of the larger protocol. The full protocol is much more involved because the value X needs to be converted into a symmetric session key K and so on and so forth. But what I've presented here is enough to get the basic idea. So the intuition is that Alice and Bob generate this shared key K, the TLS session, and they use this shared key in a joint manner, securely. They can do things like decrypt data for Alice. The protocol is such that Alice can't forge data from the server because she doesn't know the session key at a critical time, but she can prove things about the data provided by the server to Bob in zero knowledge. And all of this, again, is transparent to the server. The server doesn't see any of this stuff shaded in gray. It has no idea that there's an interactive protocol happening on the back end. As far as it's concerned, it's talking to a perfectly ordinary client. All of this gives us a refined picture of Deco. It involves two steps. First, the user logs into the target website while performing a three-way handshake with the verifier, prover and verifier. And then the prover can prove things in zero knowledge about the data she gets from the server to the verifier. How then do we use DECO in a full-blown Oracle network? Suppose we have a set of Oracle nodes, Chainlink nodes, and suppose as before that Alice wants to prove that her bank account balance is about $5,000. It's very simple. All she needs to do is generate DECO proofs for these 3 nodes, prove to each of them individually that her balance is above $5,000, and they can then collectively, using a threshold signature or whatever you like, sign a report saying that they saw a valid proof. And of course, Alice, because of the use of zero-knowledge proofs, doesn't need to show her account balance directly to the Oracle nodes. All they learn, all anyone learns, is that her account balance is above $5,000. Now I'm going to talk about 3 other different example applications that illustrate how DECO can be used in an Oracle network. The first such example is private enterprise data. Let's take a supply chain example. Now, enterprises want to connect to blockchains, but have concerns about confidentiality. And this example is meant to illustrate the point. Alice is responsible in this example for shipping some goods. We'd like to take advantage of the power of smart contracts by having her paid automatically when the goods arrive. But there's a critical confidentiality issue here. The goods are, say, some rare and highly valuable commodities that are nearly impossible to get during the COVID-19 era. So she doesn't want to advertise on chain that she's shipping them. Something like, say, kittens. Or maybe that's too implausible. Nobody can get a kitten these days. So let's say gold bars. Right. Alice doesn't want to reveal on chain or to the Oracle nodes that she's shipping, say, 2 tons in gold bars. So the shipment details can be represented in some cryptographically concealed form in the contract. We'll call this representation C. Now, Alice is shipping these bars using a service called Bob's Big Boats. Somehow, she needs to get data about the shipment of the gold bars from Bob's Big Boats to the contract in a trustworthy and confidential way. You can easily see how she can use DECO for this purpose. She logs into Bob's website, executes DECO with the Oracle network to prove that the shipment specified in the contract in that critical value C has arrived, and that's it. And you'll observe that, again, because of the use of zero-knowledge proofs here, we can completely conceal the existence of the gold bars, conceal all the critical shipping details. Example 2 involves what's often referred to as decentralized identity. Suppose that Alice wants to take out a loan from a bank and needs a credential proving that she's over 18 years of age, a requirement to do this. She can generate such a proof using DECO. What she does is log into a few websites with an authoritative record of her birth date. And she uses DECO then to prove to the Oracle network that she's over 18 years of age. The Oracle network then generates a report saying Alice is over 18. This trustworthy report can be used as a credential for Alice to take out her loan or for any other similar purpose. And again, we get confidentiality here. Use of zero-knowledge proofs means that Alice doesn't have to reveal to the Oracle nodes her exact birth date. She just proves to them that she's over 18, and that's all they learn. We can use exactly this approach to generate decentralized credentials from any authoritative website. Again, with no modification of the website. And this seems like a really good way to bootstrap a decentralized identity ecosystem. Our final example involves confidential DeFi. Suppose that Alice and Bob want to execute a binary option. What do I mean by this? I mean they want to make a bet on the value of some asset X. If X rises, then Bob pays Alice, say, 100 ETH. If X falls or stays the same, Alice pays 100 ETH to Bob. This is pretty easy to do using a smart contract and the help of an Oracle network. The two players here, Alice and Bob, each deposit 100 ETH into the smart contract. And then the Oracle network checks the value of the critical asset, relays it to the contract, and the winner gets paid. This is relatively simple. But what if Alice and Bob don't want the Oracle network to learn what X is, what asset they're betting on? What they can do is the following. They store in the smart contract a commitment, a cryptographically concealed representation of X, along with the contract terms, in other words, the terms that determine who wins the bet. And then the winner of the bet, Bob in this case, can contact a trustworthy website or multiple websites and use Deco to prove to the Oracle network that he gets the money. The critical feature we get from use of Deco here is that the Oracle network doesn't learn X. And we can also conceal the terms of the contract. Before I wrap up, I want to emphasize, to be clear, that there's one thing that Deco can't do. A user can't log into a website and then unilaterally, to say on her own, generate a trustworthy Deco proof that she can then put directly on chain. Deco cannot generate such proofs directly. You need to have the Oracle network in the loop.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm thrilled to have some of the true pioneers of the DeFi landscape with us today to talk through exactly how decentralized finance is evolving and what are some of the key factors driving it forward. We're very lucky to have Kane from Synthetics, Stani from Aave, and Andre from Yearn with us today. And very excited to hear all their thoughtful points on how DeFi is evolving. I think just as a useful introduction, so to make sure everyone knows exactly what's being discussed and the nature of the platforms, maybe each person can just quickly introduce in a minute what it is that their platform does and seeks to achieve.
I guess I'll go first. I'm Kane, founder of Synthetics. We build synthetic assets. It's a synthetic asset issuance platform on Ethereum. So we allow people to get price exposure to things like Bitcoin, gold, silver, soon oil, and other assets on Ethereum.
Stani, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Stani. I'm the founder and CEO of Aave. So Aave is a money market protocol where you can deposit stable coins and other assets to earn interest. And against that, you have a credit line that you can utilize and borrow other assets. And basically, currently, we started the Aave protocol beginning of this year, and we have roughly over $1 billion worth of value locked in the smart contracts. And our story started a few years ago with a first lending protocol named ETHLend, Ethereum Lending. And now we basically are transforming what we have as a money market protocol and giving it up to the Aave governance.
And then from my side, hey guys, Andre Cronje, I'm from Yearn. Yearn is a money optimizer, I guess you can say. It looks for opportunities in the DeFi space, in the saving space, in the lending, the borrowing space, and tries to switch between these different lenders to maximize yield for people that provide funds, LPs or just users. Very simplistically, it is a smart exploitation system that tries to make the most money possible for people that give it money. That sounds horrible.
Cool. So sounds good. Lots of very useful next generation things in all of those platforms. From personal experience, I can tell you it's quite amazing what's being built. So I think one of the first questions that might be useful to consider is what do each of you feel is driving the growth of DeFi? What is kind of driving this massive growth in the amount of value flowing into DeFi and just the growth of the DeFi space in general? And I think for some simplicity's sake, we can start backwards, starting from Andre, and then going to you, Stani, and then Kane, if that works.
Sweet. I think the answer is pretty simple: greed. I mean, the reason there's such a massive influx of money right now is because people are making money in insane amounts. And the reason they're making money in insane amounts is because we came up with a whole new Ponzi, which is governance tokens, which is this wonderful way where we give away free worthless tokens that for some reason people buy. And then the next wave comes in that buys that, so that the first wave can sell it into the one that just bought, and we just keep repeating the cycle while it's accruing more and more and more value. And this is making people paper wealthy by insane amounts. And I might have strong opinions on this thing that we can unpack, but it's not the sustainable part of DeFi. So if we do look past that for a little bit and we look underneath it, we'll see the protocols that are accruing value. And this is things like the Synthetics ecosystem, like the Aave ecosystem, like Compound, and the supporting tools like Chainlink as well, for example. These are the real things accruing value, because they're the ones that are going to be here in a year from now when this greed phase is over. But I mean, I don't think there's much argument on this point that the current massive influx is purely because of this new greed cycle that we've created seemingly out of thin air.
Stani, what do you think is driving the growth of DeFi, the current growth?
Well, I wanted to say that it's Andre, but as he came up with a good explanation. What basically Andre described is how financial markets work. There are sort of things that drives the human behavior and basically in different kinds of yield opportunities. And some of the yield opportunities are quite substantial in the way that they would not be possible in normal situations. And kind of like when we are creating value obligations and basically this kind of like tokens in a way that it's very difficult to get them, and we have like different kinds of waves of people buying into the system. Because like the thing what we have now in yield farming, which is very problematic, not just in the sense that how it's designed in many ways, but also like how economics work, is that money comes to money. And basically it means that people who have capital can basically deploy that capital in different protocols and mint those tokens, and then sell that to people who don't have capital but have just sufficient capital to basically buy them and kind of take the exposure. It's kind of like financial system is a bit of built this way, and it's not fair, and that's how the market works. But there is a layer underlying there which is more kind of like profounded in a way that when you build things that are actually more efficient, so let's say you're building base layers, or whether it's basically Aave synthetics or Wiren in a way that you're optimizing yields, when you're kind of like using technology to get rid of efficiencies, you kind of like create actually very valuable this kind of like opportunities. And I think that's like the real growth that is happening. So when we are looking at the growth of DeFi, I think there's substantial growth in things that we're building and things that are kind of like in long-term sustainable, but then there's the noise on top of them. And there will be always noise when people enter into financial markets with less knowledge, and they usually have to pay for that knowledge by actually buying things from other people then. And it's kind of like it's a dilemma in finance, but now we see it even more because we have so much technology involved and less people understand what people are doing in DeFi.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree with both Stani and Andre here. I think that ultimately we've got this sort of renaissance of tokens, right? Of tokenomics and token design. And in my view, tokens are just a coordination mechanism, right? In the same way that, equity in, traditional finance is a coordination mechanism, right? It's supposed to be this vector that allows you to both, capture some of the value that's accrued by a firm, as well as to coordinate, what happens, right? Now, obviously, there's inefficiencies, as Stani mentioned there, that tokens have the potential to remove, right? They have the potential to, significantly increase the efficiency of these coordination games and allow a bunch of people to come together and, create a system with very specific and defined rules and know that the rules are going to be adhered to. And I think that when you are redesigning finance in the way that we are in this new, potentially more efficient way, and these tokens represent some ownership of these new systems that are being built, there's a lot of excitement because someone can come in, they can supply some capital, and they can earn a portion of the network, right? Which I think is a really powerful mechanism that hasn't really existed before. We had the ICO boom, and you had to come in and buy tokens to get a piece of the action, but now you can come in and just supply capital, and I think that has created a lot of noise, as I think they both rightly pointed out. But there is an underlying kernel of a very powerful force at play here, which is that we're all kind of on the ground floor of this redesigning of traditional financial systems into these new decentralized financial systems, and anyone who participates in that, I think, is going to potentially reap significant rewards, right? If they allocate their time and capital effectively.
Yeah, I think there's kind of there's more than two, but two of the more fascinating things that I see going on here is, first of all, you have incentives to bootstrap usage. And those incentives are coming from the same kind of a similar dynamic to what you had during the token boom, but now that dynamic is being funneled to bootstrap usage and bootstrap adoption of the technology rather than just distributing the token, right? So that's a useful thing for platforms that would want to bootstrap their usage that way, right? That measure themselves on the basis of value, secured, and volume, right? So that's not so different from what I've seen exchanges do, where they offer Lamborghinis or they offer various incentives, right? So in as far as I can tell from my limited kind of window-like views into the crypto financial markets, incentives play a very strong role, right? So the people that can come up with very good incentives suddenly get volume and value secured, which then creates a virtuous cycle about you being the place the price discovery happens, and then now you're in a kind of position that's difficult to unseat. And this is the place where people are willing to expend massive amounts of like cash resources. But now there's this new resource that's come into existence, and how do we expend that resource in a programmatic, efficient manner to meet these usage adoption goals we have, or not we, but like these platforms have, right? And so that's that's a very fascinating kind of evolution, especially considering that you're kind of taking the power of those token sales, now turning them into this usage adoption mechanism. And then the second thing that's quite fascinating is the distribution of a governance token in this manner, right? Where I don't fully understand myself exactly how that distribution affects voting or the proper voting on a system, but it does at least distribute it to users, right? So now you're at least distributing it to people that provide usage to the system and volume to the system, and therefore they presumably have some kind of aligned interest on that level. So it's quite on those two dimensions, it's definitely kind of an innovative thing. So just continue down this rabbit hole where there's strong opinions, and then there's kind of more charitable opinions, and there's all kinds of opinions on exactly how this evolves. I guess starting with you, Kane, as the person who really got a lot of this going initially and began this yield farming dynamic and movement. How do you see this in various incentives play out? So like, how do you see yield farming evolving over the next year or 2 or 3? How do you see it going from here as a mechanism that achieves this and other things?
So I think, the distribution of Wi-Fi is probably one of the most interesting experiments that we've seen, right? YAMS and Wi-Fi, I think, are two very interesting experiments that we've seen play out. And, there's an argument that I think has been made about YAMS is just this, kind of game, and it's, kind of this fluffy thing with no underlying, core to it. I think maybe we'll see that view change. But I think with Wi-Fi, it's very clear that there's a value accrual mechanism going on, right? And so you had this token where, it was 100% fair launch. There was no pre-sale, there's no founder reward, there's no, whatever, right? And everyone started the game with the exact same rules, maybe a little bit of asymmetry in terms of information, but, not a massive amount, right? To the point where the whales who were supplying liquidity and who were earning it, a lot of them didn't think that it was going to last and dumped, right? And then there were people who, were potentially supplying liquidity and held or whatever. And, I think it's kind of exceeded expectations significantly in terms of, the price appreciation. So this idea that you can start this game without any privileged positions, everyone's got the same rule set, everyone can kind of run out and play the game, I think is extremely powerful, because the level of coordination that it creates and the level of buy-in and engagement in a community is incredibly powerful. It's like, I don't think we've seen anything like this in history, right? This idea that you could bring people from all over the world together so quickly to create this really, really powerful community. And I think that we're just going to see more experimentation around that. Some of it's going to be good experimentation, some of it's going to be bad experimentation, but it's going to be experimentation. I think there's going to be a lot of lessons learned.
So Andre, how do you see yield farming playing out over the next year, 2 years, 3 years? How do you feel that the yield farming dynamic and trend out in the DeFi space will continue to evolve from here?
I mean, my base gut instinct tells me it's not sustainable. But at the same time, we've never been able to test something like this, because it's if you go buy a Coca-Cola, you get shares of Coke. What would you do with those shares? Like would you maybe keep it because you just got it for free? So why wouldn't you keep it and see if it maybe appreciates in value, or maybe I could do something with it, or do you sell it? There's a whole new meta game happening with the stuff that if you ask me this question purely based on instinct, I'm going to tell you it's not sustainable. If you give stuff for free to people, they're going to continuously sell it because their value prop is not in the thing you gave them, and you actually allow them to exit it for something else. So it has to dry up. The terminology I've been using lately is liquidity locusts, because it's all of these massive, LPs that they come in, they farm your token dry, they dump it, and when it's no longer ROI useful for them, they just move on to the next thing. So again, logically, I feel it has to stop. But we've never been able to test this. This is a completely new experiment in territory, And I'm surprised it's lasted for as long as it has. And I think I'm going to be proven wrong on this one. And I think they're not necessarily in the current form, because one thing, so synthetics, I mean, all due respect, I still love Compound, but I mean, everyone likes to be quick that they started this whole yield incentive. But I mean, the SNX pools have been there since the dawn of time, incentivizing liquidity, and like if anyone, Kane and team have been through a lot of different iterations of testing what is good to incentivize, what isn't good to incentivize, and in what quantity do you incentivize it, over what time spectrum do you incentivize it, and they've done so much discovery and testing on this, and they're still using the formula. So just going off of their data, I have to say that it has been vastly successful. And I mean, we can see the liquidity it provided to something like SUSD, which is phenomenal, and that's largely thanks to those original incentives. So it's fascinating. I mean, I'd love to see it still exist in 2 to 5 years from now. Logically, I think something has to change a little bit. It's not sustainable. But the only real comment I can make on that question is short-term versus long-term. And long-term, I think we'll see something similar to the model we have now, but definitely not as insane incentive mechanisms, because the rewards now far exceed the risk and liability you take. I'm more worried about the short-term view that it is creating in the space, where people expect this to continue into the long term, and I think that's that gap when it jumps from such high reward system now to less reward system later is going to cause a little bit of reputational damage, in that people will quickly say, okay, but it dropped from 100% to 10%. This is not sustainable, blah, blah, blah. I'm going away. This is pointless. It's the same thing they do with the token price. When the token price is going up and it's green candles, everyone's happy. The project is fantastic. These are the best founders ever. This is amazing. And when that starts going red and it starts going down, then this is a scam coin. This is shit coin. What are these people doing? They need to completely fire everyone and get new teams. So in the short term, I'm worried that that's going to happen, and I foresee that happening. And in the long term, hell, I'm just along for the ride.
Got it. Thank you. Stani, how do you feel that yield farming and various incentives there will play out over the next year, 2 years, 3 years? How will that evolve in the DeFi ecosystem, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It really depends on how things are basically designed, and what is like, who are the entities and the people who are actually farming, and how they're getting access to this. I mean, if the idea is like, there's two ideas. The first idea is basically distributing governance power. Like that's one thing, and the other basic idea is to give basically kind of like a yields. So the way I see it, how it goes now, is that a lot of this yield farming happens from big accounts. So the big people are basically farming everything, and they're selling everything because that's part of basically their strategy. And end of the day, of course, it's kind of like, it's a question of how you could use whatever you farm. I mean, as Andres said, we haven't been in this position in terms of like where, with the Coca-Cola example, or basically when you buy Tesla and every mile you drive, you get Tesla shares. But the thing is now that the models that we have is that because of the crypto economics offers the markets where you can freely trade these tokens, you're basically taking those Tesla shares and using them to buy electricity and fill up your Tesla car. And that's how basically it's kind of like, even though those tokens are built for governance, the purposes are kind of a bit of different, because we had experimentation in terms of where the governance power has been given to the people in terms of usage. And Good example is Finland, the country where I'm from, where most of the banks here are cooperatives, which basically means that as you're using their services over the years, and this has been done for past 100 years or so. So the more you're using their services and basically a bunch of other things, you're basically getting this kind of credits. And based on those credits, you can either use them to pay services, or you can actually exercise them to vote in that bank governance. And what happened in this system or other cooperative systems, for example, grocery stores that are organized a similar way in Finland or in UK, is basically eventually kind of people don't care that much to vote on things where things are going fine and professionals are taking over, and kind of like it becomes somewhat a bit more boring and institutionalized. It might be good, it might be bad depending what's the perspective. But I think like the problematic part now is that it's not about even usage. If you think about it, it's actually who has the most capital owns the system. Like if you look at the accounts that are farming everything, like these are the same people, and they're basically farming most of the things, and the control goes to these people eventually, one way or another, or protocol launchers who are basically issuing this kind of like a yield farming strategies where they have basically team tokens. So eventually it's a game of like who has the most of the capital takes the kind of like a control of the protocol. And it's not actually the usage. That's completely wrong perception, because the usage is actually how many users you are using the services over a period of time, and based on that you basically reward them to participate in governance, which is very difficult to achieve in DeFi. And that now the most easiest and efficient way is just calculate how much they're contributing capital, because everything now is calculated in the space, how much you're locking value, providing liquidity, which is kind of like a nonsense, the whole total locked value. And I mean, the idea there was kind of like how much people are trusting your smart contracts, but that's not the right way to measure businesses or protocols, their success and their user behaviors. And now it's basically a game where whales who have a lot of capital can actually own protocols. So if you are wealthy, you become wealthier and you own one of the most critical infrastructures of the future, which is the financial system of tomorrow. And that's like the most fucked up thing in this system.
I see. So in the context of these systems that actually interoperate in quite interesting ways, in addition to the yield farming and all those types of dynamics, Andre, you have a huge amount of experience with this. How do you look at the right way to compose different DeFi, what are called money Legos? So how do you look at how different DeFi infrastructure or DeFi protocols should get composed to operate properly in your opinion?
Well, first things, Sergey, thanks for actually thinking that I have any kind of plan or methodology when it comes to putting these money Legos together. Really, it's the same as you do with normal Legos. You one of two options. You either have a manual that tells you how you're going to put it together, or I never have the manual. You have a box filled with a random bunch of pieces of different ones that you've collected over the years. You throw that out on the carpet and you try and see which pieces you can use to build the thing you just envisioned. So it's really what pieces can I use to accomplish the job? And a lot of times you thought you were going to build a pretty castle, but you didn't have the pieces for that. So on the one side you're lacking a wall, and the other one you've got a roof that's a plane's wing or something. But you mix it together to kind of figure out what you want. But it's less about. I mean, I definitely don't have a plan when I approach how I put these money Legos together. But it's more about what do you want to achieve, and then which parts do you want to use to achieve that. And it might not be the exact result you want, but the beauty of this is it's going to be something, and that's what makes it really cool. Because even if you and I've done this a lot of times as well, where I'll be like, I want to build X, Y, Z. I start putting all of my little Lego pieces together and I start building towards it. And then halfway through, I realized, look, I don't have the pieces to build that. But while playing with those pieces, I discovered I could actually build A, B, C, which is also cool and something completely different. So for now, I'd say it's a lot less about how you approach composability and how you build with it, and it's a lot more exploratory. You kind of just have to play with the pieces, and then as you play with them, you come up with cool things that you can put together. It's not great from a more structured sense, because I think a lot of people that'll want to come in this space, you know, and there's lots of sites doing this. Set's doing a good job, Como is doing a good job, and they're all getting to a point where it is more structured, where I want to accomplish XYZ, so these are the things I need to use. But we're not there yet. We're still very much in playing and figuring out. I mean, for the longest time, DYDX is a great example. For the longest time, I was using a bunch of their stuff. And I didn't even realize you could do something like flash loans with them, because there's no documentation available that it is possible. Don't worry, Stanny. Nowadays I use Ava. Don't have a panic attack. But like originally when I looked at those, I didn't realize you could do it. But that's because the way they designed it in code is you borrow first, you repay second. So just because of that design mechanic, not because they had built it for that purpose, but because they built it in that way, you could accomplish this net result. So there's so many awesome things like that happens in this space. And I mean, I'm pretty sure Kane and Stanny can talk more than I can on this topic, because I'm a top level consumer. They're bottom level protocols. But like, so often people build stuff you could never have envisioned they were going to build it. Like someone just launches a product that uses your platform, and you're like, how the hell did they think of this? Like why? And then you play with it, and then you're actually like, okay, this is actually cool. Anyway, long story short, yeah, there's much less of a plan, and it's a lot more of just exploratory fun. You know, it's the fact that the pieces are there that makes it so awesome. But I do like the fact that we call them money Legos, because when you step on one accidentally, they do hurt as much as real Legos. So please, you know, be aware of that.
We'll keep that in mind. Thank you for the heads up. Kane, how do you feel is the right way to think about composing these DeFi building blocks and what are called money Legos? What's the right way to reason through how you can compose them together in the proper way?
So I think, you know, one thing that's really interesting at the moment is the kind of positive externalities of some of the things that we develop, right? So, you know, we built this LP rewards contract, right? We actually commissioned Anton from 1inch to build it, because we were distributing rewards manually, and we said we need a better way of doing this. And, you know, Anton, being the brilliant guy that he is, like, whipped up this crazy thing in like a week, and, you know, we started using it. And then a bunch of other people started using it. And now it's become this kind of, you know, DeFi primitive of how to distribute tokens in this continuous fashion, which is great, right? The issue that we've kind of seen lately is, you know, we thought that was like this very granular kind of modular composable thing that people could, you know, hook into different platforms, but it's actually still a little too clunky, right? Like, you actually need lower level components that can be combined. And part of the reason for that is that every time someone makes a modification to that contract, it needs to be re-audited. You know, it needs to be reviewed by people, et cetera, and you know, adds additional risk. And so I think that over time we're going to develop more granular components that can be combined together, that, you know, are off the shelf, that are well vetted, that, you know, don't need to be re-audited, et cetera. Like, there's maybe a few little parameters that can be changed, and you can view it really quickly and reason about what the you know, that component's going to do. You know, and so I think that that's something that we still need to push forward towards, and you know, kind of, we've got money Legos, but a lot of the Legos, like, you know, they're kind of weird and malformed, and you don't necessarily know how they're going to click together, right? So we need like really rigid, well-defined Legos that, you know, you can put them together and you know exactly how they're going to work, which is the next step, I think.
Right. Well, making sure they're secure and nobody steps on it, which I think is makes perfect sense. So Stani, how do you feel that these composable DeFi systems, different protocols, and money Legos should really be combined to make the next generation of financial products. How do you view that?
Yeah, so basically, as kind of like from our perspective, like we're building pretty much like a base layer, which is, I mean, as a lending, borrowing, or like a money market protocol, there's interesting functions, but the main functionality is in the sense boring, kind of that, because the idea is that we can provide a layer for others builders to come up with things like, for example, what Andre is doing with Iron and other developers. And I think what is underrated in the DeFi and the whole kind of like value proposition, it's actually not just permissionless access for consumers, but I think the even interesting part from developers' perspective is the permissionless ability to build things on anything that is on chain, for example, on Ethereum, or if there's bridging and so forth. So I think that's the like very interesting value proposition, because it means that anyone from any part of the world can basically build financial products, tailor basically financial experiences, and combine different things. And that is like the very cool thing. Of course, the dangerous part is here that since we're handling value, a lot of value, and things are driven by incentives. Incentives come in different shapes and some forms, and some of them are greedier than others. And it means that it might bring, if you come up with something very interesting, you draw a lot of network effects, and you draw a lot of capital into your system. And kind of like, if you aren't focused on security, and by the way, one of the interesting things is that Andre, for example, when he builds things, he focuses quite a lot on security. And we kind of see a lot of people coming in and trying to quickly deploy things without going too much into details. As Kane said, that when you combine the smart contracts that is already available to you and they're audited, it's not the same thing. You need to basically audit the whole thing. So if you're building a house and you get the walls from one place, you get the floor from another place, end of the day, you need someone to come and inspect the building to make sure that everything's done properly. And this very same thing applies to whatever work. And this is the kind of like a main thing. I really love how people are using Aave and creating this kind of different things using Aave and synthetics, SUSD, SNX, and kind of like getting those skills. Like all of this functionality is very fascinating. And sometimes like what I love to do more is actually look at what others are doing and somehow basically getting involved and telling my opinion, like, because these ideas, they come from like, it's difficult to even imagine like where people come up with these ideas, like Andre basically said. And I love to brainstorm in different things, and you see kind of like quite interesting stuff being built. What I'm scared is that basically like as DeFi protocols are growing a lot, and this is my fair opinion, in the sense that they're starting to think like how they can accumulate all the wealth. Like they're starting to become the banks that they basically try to escape, and they're trying to think like how we could do and how we could get the capital basically injected into your protocol. And what is happening here, that there is a slight fear that kind of like this composability idea will get challenged in a way that protocols might start to think with their governances, like how we could do this ourselves, or like empower to our like protocol and build there. Where actually the real value added is when these different protocols and things built on top are working seamlessly together, because now it's possible to do. And that is the way to actually recycle value and capture value and remove the inefficiencies. And that's way like you're basically creating better things and better ecosystem. And this is how we have built DeFi to this extent. But I think at some point we will see some challenging phases coming up in that sense. And that is why it's important for like every developer and the ecosystem to think about like always composability in mind, because that's the gateway how we came here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's generally good when people focus and have a clear piece of what they want to succeed at, right? And they focus on building out that part of a stack or that part of a process, and they focus their energies on doing that well with their limited resources. And I think that's how we've kind of arrived at this place in DeFi's growth so far, is that there are a number of focused people building different parts of the stack, different pieces of the puzzle that then get composed together in better and better formats and better, more advanced configurations. But that still requires people to focus and make those individual building blocks and to make them very well and flexible enough to be composed. So on that note, one of the important building blocks that is also helping to enable DeFi is oracles. And I also wanted to get everybody's feedback separately on how they feel that oracles are playing into DeFi's growth and how they affect what's possible in DeFi and their general importance in driving that growth and enabling DeFi to happen. And for this question, I guess initially we can turn to Kane. Kane, how do you feel that oracles play into DeFi's growth and accelerate it and play into its continued evolution?
I mean, it's sort of an extension of my previous, point that we need these well audited, well trusted, bedded down, components that people can plug into. And off-chain data is obviously a critical one of those, right? Like, we need to know what the price of Bitcoin is on Ethereum if we want tokenized versions of Bitcoin to be tradable, et cetera, et cetera. So, price discovery and things like that, I think are really critical. And, to sort of take the extension of what this kind of openness and composability does is, Synthetics sponsors a bunch of feeds from Chainlink, right? Aave sponsors a bunch of feeds from Chainlink to be published on chain. That is a very fucking expensive process right now, right? Like, I don't think people even like Synthetics is still running. We're still running our own oracles. We're thankfully, I think in like 48 hours, maybe it's like 52 hours, something like that. There's a countdown timer somewhere. We're switching over from our existing oracle to 100% Chainlink oracles, right? And one of the reasons for that is efficiency, to try and not have this duplication of effort. The interesting thing, I think, in DeFi is all of the effort that we put in, that Stanny and his team have put in, that Chainlink has put in to make this work. It's all now available. It's there. It's open. It's on chain. Anyone can access it. And that's just a very different process to TradFi, right? Where you'd build this little walled garden, you'd invest a bunch of money in it, you'd negotiate with the people that you're doing, and you would have this little siloed thing that you controlled and only you had access to. And actually what's happening is you're building these kind of public goods where you've got all this infrastructure and all this value that's there, and people are coming together to kind of coordinate and essentially sponsor it and build it. And I think that what that will enable is pretty incredible. It's another component of this kind of financial stack that we need to have access to, and the fact that it's open is just amazing. So that's something that obviously we're very much looking forward to. Let's hope Kane doesn't get tired meme that's been floating around for a while. I can promise you that I will sleep much better, in about 48 hours when we cut over to Chainlink oracles and know that we've got a very secure system that we're no longer reliant on maintaining. It'll definitely improve my tiredness quotient for sure.
Great, Kane. Absolutely thrilled to help with that. We know you work night and day to make all this happen. Yeah, I think those are some good points. I think real security is expensive. I think that's one thing that people don't fully realize. Decentralized computation is expensive if you do it right, and there does absolutely need to be a globally shared data resource that's used by the DeFi community in an open, composable way. So I think all those things that you said, I completely agree with. I'd also love to hear on Andre's point of view. Andre, how do you feel that oracles fit into DeFi's growth and allowing it to continue to grow and function properly? How do you feel that oracles fit into all this?
Well, I always like to go back to the ICO stage when you know we at that point we were putting everything on the blockchain. We were putting cheeseburgers on the blockchain. We were putting people's chihuahuas on the blockchain. It didn't matter what it was. There was going to be a new blockchain that's going to launch with digital tags for your cats on the blockchain. Now the point of all of that stuff, and the reason why I always told people, look, all of this shit fails, is because blockchains are very bad at interacting with anything outside of them. They're fantastic at interacting with everything inside of them. So like even today, Bitcoin is very good at interacting with Bitcoin, but it's not very good at interacting with anything outside of that. Ethereum is very good with interacting with the assets on it and ETH, but it's not very good with working with anything outside of that. Now, there's a whole different paradigm there where we start talking about cross-chain and stuff like REN, etc., which I'm not going to go into. But the beauty about oracles are they bring these external data points onto the chain so that you can actually start interacting with them. And I actually think people underestimate how strong that becomes when we start talking about more data points and a higher frequency of data points. So I mean, I know right now, and I respect that a lot. You guys are going a very conservative point with, you know, you're slowly transcribing data. You're very carefully adding new streams, and that's because security is paramount right now, and I agree with that. But like once that infrastructure seamlessly exists, where it can just plug in any of these external data points that gets transcribed on chain, and I mean I'm not even just talking about pricing information. You know, even when you start having weather information, you start looking at different insurance systems you can build. If you start having flight pattern information there, you can start doing futures on flight destinations and prediction markets. So there's so much that evolves the second you can start adding these data into the Ethereum system. Now I remember there was a different discussion at one point, and I don't remember who it was. I think it was Larry Lawmaster, who he was talking about when and this touches to Kane's point as well, where he was talking about, you know, when you trust one of these big Oracle companies, you're just it's basically you're trusting Dan from IT. You know, if you had your own Dan, that he had his own little computer set up and he was running his own little price feed that would just have a smart contract wallet and write it on chain. And you know what, you put so much faith in Dan to keep that thing up and running and to keep it secure and to make sure it's not compromised, that you end up having 500 Dans that are all trying to do this job and to make it, you know, robust enough and scalable enough. Because if you have a stale price feed that's you know sitting there for 10 minutes too long in the open permissionless environment that we have, that is a lot of problems that you just made for yourself. People think it's fine, you know, whatever, it didn't update for 10 minutes. No. If you're in this world we're in, where you have such sophisticated arbitrage already happening, and it's not even at a level where I would call it intelligent, you know, it's still very manual driven, but like that's quickly millions you've lost just because of that. So I think it's twofold. I think on the one side, it's the wealth of new products it unlocks as oracles mature and allow blockchains to be aware of more than just what's inside of them. And on the other hand, it's this incredible robust security infrastructure that you know gives, and Kane put this well, and I can echo the sentiment. It gives me peace of mind. Like when I had my own oracles I was using, that was one of the first things I would check if I wake up. And, you know, you don't sleep when you have these systems. You wake up every 1.5 to 2 hours to quickly do a spot check on your phone. Is everything fine? How many Telegram messages do I have? Okay, less than 1,000, nothing broke. More than 10,000, oh shit, I better get up. So just having that peace of mind and that comfort that comes with that, as a builder, I cannot express how vital it is. So, you know, I'm both, oracles make me both excited about the things I'm going to be able to build in a year from now. And in the immediate short term, they make me a lot more comfortable and a lot more at ease because I know that that is a huge risk vector that is being taken care of. So I mean, I'm not trying to sound like a Chainlink shill here. I think everyone already knows, if they look at my Twitter, that clearly I am one. So it's a little bit difficult for me to not shill here, but I mean, it is on the virtues of how much power it brings into the ecosystem, and I think right now, you know, we have feeds that is creating value for everyone. I mean, I've got a bunch of weird little single-sided AMMs I'm busy developing with them, and you know, that's not what they were even intended to be used for. But as it expands and we start getting more data points, damn, we're gonna have some sexy systems in the future. That's for sure.
Yeah, Andre, I really want to echo that sentiment. That's great to hear, and I'm glad that you see it that way. We're thrilled to help make everything more stable now and to really expand what people can build. I'm personally always very proud when we put out a new data feed and that allows the creation of some new market or a new product, and that enables a whole new category of things to exist out in the DeFi ecosystem. And we feel very lucky to be working with, you know, people like Kane and Stani and you and all these people to enable all of that to exist. And actually, on weather insurance, we recently had weather go live, and we already have a live production weather insurance product that's providing crop insurance in some developing countries and other places. So I think you're actually completely right on that second point, that as more data goes on, you'll start to see the amount of markets, the amount of financial products scale up to go in lockstep with the availability of that data. I'd also be thrilled, Stani, to hear how you think Oracle's play into DeFi's growth and how they play a role in driving that growth forward, and kind of what role they have to play in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, when I called you, I think it was like a couple of years ago or a year and a half. I can't remember. I mean, I explained pretty clearly, like, we have this Oracle that basically we're running, and like half of the maintenance issues or things that we need to fix in terms of kind of like failures was always started with the Oracle. And there's always something, and kind of like it took a lot of resources for a small team like us. We're not that small as Andre in terms of like how many people are developing, but it takes like a lot of resources from us. And what's kind of like helped us when we found like one solution that works, we got rid of that stuff. So we took resources from whatever went always fixing this kind of like a system which wasn't our main product, and was the only thing was kind of like secure the feeds, the data into the smart contract, which is one of the most, it's kind of like the blood in human body. I mean, that has to be accurate and flowing all the time. And if it stops, as Andre said, that then things are going pretty wrong, and there's losses, quite a lot of losses. And that was like our kind of like thing there. And I think for us, what was important to find something kind of like, our goal was to find a consensus, like something that others are using, something that is reliable, and they have like a plan. I don't want to shill either, by the way, like a Chainlink shill. Like, if everyone reads my posts when I'm either drunk or sober, I write a lot of good things because I love what you guys are doing. And what's important there is, for me, is that like there's a consensus what people are using, because this helps basically us to build products and things that are working on, let's say, in synthetics, are working at Aave, and are working at Wiren, and our products are basically meshed up with this money ledger structure. So they have to have functionality. And I think, like, in terms of like data, it's kind of like funny how like it's crazy, like how for example, Andre said that like what kind of things you could do in terms of finance, but also like how much data there's available in the real world that actually could be super useful on chain. Of course, not all of the data. Like, you don't want to put all the data because it has a price to feed it. But the things you can build, like beyond DeFi, basically beyond financial application on chain, there's so many things you could build. Like, I believe that DeFi is a we'll build quite long of the infrastructure now. Like the next couple of years, it will be pure the infrastructure and the financial products. But the cool part is when we start to see other parts of the on-chain economy to evolve, and then DeFi utilized there, and we don't see like money Legos. We will see like all kinds of Legos with connected to e-commerce and NFTs and so forth. Like we'll have a kind of like economy here on chain, and that data is very valuable. And kind of like if you think about what's happening, like for example with Chainlink, it's kind of responsible of the DeFi ecosystem, because those price feeds are the blood of the DeFi protocols, like for example Aave and Synthetics, and the incentives are aligned in the ways that they need to work. And because it's not our like main thing to uphold oracles and focus on that, we can focus on the very exact thing that we want to do and build just a secure piece of underlying foundation block that anyone can use, build on top, utilize, and making sure that that piece of block is competitive enough and basically flexible enough that we attract people to build things and innovate. That is what like we want to focus upon. And this is like one big thing that we don't need to be scared of. And I definitely like, there's two things I'm personally kind of like worried, always been, the oracles and the value locked in the smart contracts, and making sure like that actually you have done everything and like, because end of the day, I mean, that functionality there, I mean, the code is public and so forth. The less responsibility like the Aave community has, the Aave team has, the better, because then we can actually focus on other things, like to our core business models.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sergey. I just realized myself, Stanley, and Kane, and all of our teams can sleep peacefully at night, because you don't get to sleep peacefully at night, because we've just shifted all of our worries about oracles onto you. So thanks for that, my man.
Absolutely. If I can enable you guys to focus on making all of this happen, I've been building smart contracts for like 7 years now. I've been watching the token movie on rerun for like a number of years. The fact that you guys are here building something that goes beyond let's make a token, send a token, is really the realization of this technology's like fuller potential. And so I'm absolutely grateful to be working with people like you that are taking this entire industry into this direction of more usefulness and real financial products, not just the definition of ownership. And so if we take this role on and you focus on your roles, and we all together can build this type of blockchain-based financial products future, I think at the end of the day, in a number of years, we'll all be very proud of that. So I'm more than happy to take on whatever that specific role. So thank you for working with us. I think that what Stani said is something I'm also definitely seeing. I'm definitely seeing the teams that can focus on building their core product instead of worrying about making blockchain infrastructure are able to push a lot of features and make a lot of new things that make them attractive in the market. And I think that's a trend that's going to definitely continue, and something we really want to enable, right? Like, how do we make really good financial products that are really appealing and really competitive and really focused? And then the second thing about enabling other categories of data is that I actually see that as you enable other categories of data and you have insurance or other things like NFTs, you actually have new forms of collateral. So you have new forms of collateral flowing on chain, because initially you were tokenizing collateral and you were saying this represents that. Okay, that's one category of collateral. But now you have this represents that, but you need data to prove it, right? So now that's a whole new world of collateral that makes its way on chain in the form of insurance cash flows, NFTs, all the different things that oracles enable. And then all of the value from that additionally secured collateral can then flow into these DeFi protocols to earn interest or participate in various markets. So I think both of those dynamics about enabling DeFi to build very quickly and like at web quality and web speeds while maintaining security, because that security is shifted onto a platform that focuses on security, and also enabling all these other categories to shift even more collateral on chain, which will then be fed into these DeFi protocols to to generate even more usage of DeFi is that's really what I see as maybe the second stage of things that we can help enable. Maybe let's enable data to have the DeFi protocols work properly, but then let's enable many categories of data to generate lots of collateral that can make their way into those DeFi protocols, just like token value makes its way in there that way. And of all the other assets outside of the chain, the way Andre mentioned, that's trillions of dollars in assets that can be migrated on chain, but many of them don't just need a token; they need an oracle as well as a tokenized tokenization system. So it's really been fascinating talking about all this with you, and I really appreciate all the thought and effort you folks have put into building these systems and sharing the feedback here. I always wish we had more time on these amazing panels where we discuss these truly kind of next generation questions. But I think that's all the questions we have time for now, and it's always a real pleasure seeing everybody, and thank you for getting on the call at various times of day and night to talk through this. I think it's really very exciting. Thank you.
All right, everybody, allow me just one moment, and we're going to have Adlin join me as we share our